Hello everybody, my name is Anthony Benson and I work for Allies and Morrison Urban Practitioners, and we have been doing some work recently for Flintshire County Council in a range of their towns, but I'm going to talk today about Mould Town Centre, the work we've been doing for them for Mould. Just a little bit about the practice. It's quite a large architectural practice of about 250 staff. I used to work for a smaller company called Urban Practitioners who were based in this building up until about 3 years ago. We merged with Allies and Morrison about 3 years ago and now work in their own purpose-built studios on Southwark Street. We also have a smaller office in Liverpool, and that's where I try and spend as much of my time as I can. I live up there. So we do lots of residential schemes. That was Highbury before. This is Bromley by Bow, St Andrews offices. This is Southwark Street offices opposite the practice. That's one of the big retail schemes in Liverpool, Liverpool 1. This is the Hereford retail quarter, which I think you mentioned in the Hamilton Bailey street that links to the outer town or the edge of town centre. This, interestingly, is a former livestock market site. And we're the architects for this retail-led scheme. And this is also directly relevant to the issues that Mould Town are facing, which is another market town with a livestock as well as street market in the heart of it. So that's a current project. We're also working on, I think, a topic that lots of towns across the country are working on is the issue of housing growth, new towns. There is a big issue about housing delivery. This is a project in Lincolnshire called Lincolnshire Lakes, which will result in 3 or 4 new settlements on the outskirts of Scunthorpe. And so how you can create from scratch new settlements that have their own settlement centres, their own town centres, market squares, looking at existing market towns has been something that has been very informative in the work that we've been doing there, and that progresses and goes on. Letchworth, we've been doing some mastermind work in Letchworth, and we do lots of these smaller market towns across the country. Holt Master Plan, we've done a strategy for the local community groups in Holt, Thetford, similar sorts of briefs, always with bags of consultation. Actually, in this instance in Mould, we didn't do any public consultation. It was a technical piece of work which they are now engaging with the town council and going to take the piece of work that we've done out and consult on it in order to inform a strategy. So the work that we did for Mould was a technical one, which I'll talk about in a second. But these are just some slides of the sorts of places that we get out and about to and communities that we speak with. But the piece of work that we have done recently for Flintshire County Council is on their county town of Mould, and Mould is a relatively small town on the north-eastern corner of North Wales, quite near Chester and the Wirral. It's centred around a Norman church right in the heart of the town centre, dating from 1140. And the street market there has been thriving for many centuries indeed. I mean, it's been going on for years, so it is one of their key assets. It's only a small town, 10,000 residents or so. It does have a thriving independent retail sector. There's over 230 shops in the town centre with a very low vacancy rate. And this successful twice-weekly street market with around 70 stalls. In addition, it has a livestock market, which has been something that has been relevant to the work that we've been doing. So this is the High Street. So this is just a series of slides just to give you a flavour of the town. Lots of independent retailers. There has been a historic programme of some now fairly dated town centre improvements. There were riots here in 1869, which is amazing. Some public realm improvements, public art. This is the county hall. So Mould is the county town, and Flintshire County Council's offices are just on the edge of Mould, and this is one of the major sites that we looked at. The county hall site, absolutely incredible estate. It's another world really, but they are basically looking to completely decant out of this building. They want to demolish the building. The Welsh Heritage have been and had a look at it. I'm not sure what the outcome of that has been, but there has been some interest in the building. But it extends beyond this. There's 3 or 4 different phases of it. It's absolutely immense, but fascinating, actually, fascinating opportunity. So lots of the sites were rural sites on the edge of town, sites where the council felt there was opportunities for growth, new investments, some completely greenfield sites that really have been put forward through the UDP process. They've just adopted their UDP, and that took them a long time to get to that stage, and lots of the sites were promoted, and lots of the sites that were in our brief, which looks beyond the UDP, the development plan, current plan period, were put forward and rejected by the inspector or rejected by the officers, but it's minded to perhaps be part of Mould's future growth. So members now are really embracing the idea of growth in the town. They see that as an opportunity to strengthen the town centre's economy, and that was really the context within which the study was commissioned, and all these images are of the sites that we were asked to look at. Some curious situations where major infrastructure work has already gone in, sort of teeing up the sites. This is actually a series of allocated employment sites that just haven't been developed in the whole plan period, and so the council are basically asking us to consider what their opportunities might hold for other uses. I should say we did the piece of work with Colliers on property, and Mott MacDonald provided the highways advice during the piece of work. And around the edge there is a lot of this sort of sense of future growth was in someone's mind. You know, you can see the infrastructure there. It's teeing up other parts of the edge of town for potential future housing growth. Lots of car park sites. This is the site. That actually is the site of the old railway, which is no longer there now, closed in the 60s. But that is the railway line route that cuts its way through the town. And in the town centre, there's council-owned sites, listed buildings. That's the old county hall. Town centre car park sites we looked at. Some of the open spaces in the town, and as you'd expect, these sort of disused sites on the edge, which could present opportunities for new uses. This is the cattle market site, right in the heart of the town centre. So it's a crossroads town, and the main block is defined by the northern quarter of that crossroads, and the cattle market sits right in the heart of the town, served off the 2 main high streets that come together at that crossroads. And it is a big conundrum for the town, really, what to do with the cattle market. It could do with some investment. It could do with a completely new facility. It is a part of the town's heritage, and it sits alongside the street market. But people are very passionate about it, and it is going to be a key issue to try and unpick what the future of that site holds, because it's an important thing. Other towns have picked up their cattle market sites and dropped them on the edge of towns where they're less constrained, and they have succeeded. Certainly other North Wales towns have done exactly that, and this cattle market competes with those other markets. So it's a big conundrum that is facing the town, and I think that is one of the key issues that we will be looking at in the future. There are also a collection of public sector owners, which presents opportunities. The council themselves own some land in the town centre, but also the police own large areas of land in the town centre and don't need all the space that they currently have. And there are ambulance and fire station sites adjacent to the core of the town centre. So there's a range of opportunities to talk to these public sector partners and think about what opportunities those sites might present. The town has had an amazing amount of food retail in the last sort of 10 years or so. Considering it's a town of 10,000 people, it's extraordinary the amount of people that go shopping there. So it has developed this main principal function. So it's sort of over-provided in retail terms. And much of that major food retail growth has happened on the edge of town, and that has created a slightly uneasy relationship between these vast car parks. It's out of town centre formats that are dominating on that edge of town location. And whilst there may be some link trips, and certainly the arguments would have been put forward for link trips to justify these things, it is sort of another world. And of course the road infrastructure that needs to cope with all this car-borne traffic is significant. But there are some town centre car park sites. This is a site that is used for market on market day, for parking. So there's a whole range, and as you see in red, those are the sites that we were looking at. So it was a pretty wide brief. There was 36 in all, and we concluded the study, and I think that is the start of the process for the council, because it has no status, it has not been engaged the community. So it is a kind of an evidence-based piece that they can use to then engage with local businesses and residents to help evolve the replacement development plan. Also relevant to the piece of work was the Sense of Place study, which was commissioned by the Town Council and the Citterslow Group. So Moulme is one of the Citterslow towns of the slow movement, celebrating local food, local produce, and the markets are central to that character. So that was an important piece of work that was done that informed our study, and that sort of teed up many of the issues that we started to look at. But that was all about making sure that one protects the character of the town. And when you're talking in the long term about these big moves, about growth, regeneration, changes of key things that define the existing character of the town, it is actually it's tricky issues that lots of people will have strong views about. So in terms of how we approached the piece of work, there were 4 stages of work. 3 sort of sieving stages. The initial stage was suitability. So of all those 36 sites, we assessed their suitability for new developments, for redevelopment. And that was a question informed by the analysis of the town. So the planning policy context, the flooding issues, the terrain, topography, landscape features, as well as movement and highways issues. The availability was about land ownership really, and liaising with landowners, and then viability was then testing what one could get on the sites and what impact that would have on the highways network. So suitability was informed by a review of the planning policy context, the UDP, flooding issues, townscape and landscape character, property market review and the highways issues. The availability test, we spoke with a whole range of landowners, including the owners of the cattle markets in the central town, and many of the other landowners in and around the town, which was actually very, very informative in understanding what their aspirations were, and not always gunning for redevelopment. And then viability, we did design-led capacity studies for the sites for a range of different uses. Some of the sites had different options. Some of those options were then tested by colliers who did some market testing and some appraisal work. and then the capacities of those sites, housing, offices and retail, were then plugged into a sort of bespoke Saturn light model that Mott MacDonald developed specifically for the study in order to test the impact on the existing highway network. So they were the sort of three technical stages of work, and then what we ended up with was, or what we hoped to end up with, was the bones of a strategy. So that was something that we kind of offered in addition to what the brief was. The brief was a cold technical piece of work. We felt that it should be then setting a series of questions and opportunities, and effectively could form the bones of a strategy for the town, and that's what we offered, and so that's what we've done for them. So just to review some of the analysis work that was undertaken, which informed the three stages of work in the study. We looked at how the town had grown. So you can see it is essentially a junction where two major streets come together. And the railways arrived, sorry, just go back, the railway arrived before that in about 1860 odd. Was just about, well, I think it actually just closed. I think it closed in 1963, but it was still there and up to that point, just as the town was beginning to grow, and actually just as the town was beginning to need the railway. It was one of the Beecham stations that was cut in the Beecham's reports. And the town has grown fairly significantly since then. The railway no longer there, it's just a cut that cuts through the town. It's now predominantly used for car parking. So the town centre has remained actually relatively intact. And all that retail expansion has happened. It's not shown on that plan, but it's happened since 1990 out on the eastern side of town. And the County Hall site, which I mentioned before, is sort of just to the north, just cropped off that plan. So we looked at the planning policy, land use for the whole of the town. So it wasn't just about the town centre, it was a study that looked at the whole of the town. And you can see many of the sites outlined in red were questions about the appropriateness of urban extension, of housing growth for the town. Heritage assets, conservation area in the core high street, and a range of listed buildings across, mostly concentrated in the town centre. But it was the landscape issues I think were most important really to get a grip on as we undertook the piece of work, because with many of the sites being edge of town, it was the impact on the landscape and that relationship between town and country that was really central to take into account and to consider. And I think there were three discrete and distinct characters or sort of conditions around the town broadly. There was this River Allen valley that ran through the town, which actually divides the County Hall site, which is the little triangular bit of land just to the north. That's dividing the town. That's a flood zone there on the River Allen corridor. On the south is defined entirely really by a relatively recent ring road. And then there's this jagged edge, a much more sort of unfinished edge to the town on the northwestern side, which actually is where most of the opportunity sites were identified. Topography, you can see the River Allen corridor valley running right through the town. Flooding is an issue, as you can see there. Some of the sites were directly impacted by flooding, which obviously affected some of the suitability, some of the appropriate uses on the sites. And the road network. But we also took a close look at the town centre itself, really because the town centre itself, the core of it, the historic bit, is actually in very good nick really, and the high street's strong. The street market runs along the centre of the high street. It's generally a success, I think, for a relatively small town. Partly, I think, because it serves this wider catchment, whilst the resident population isn't any bigger than any of the other 6 or 7 towns in the county. It does have this retail function that people understand and support. But we're also interested in the edge of centre sites, because some of those sites were identified for potential redevelopments, and there is this constant pressure that all towns are facing, how to accommodate food retail and what the relationship between food retail is and a town centre, as well as the market. The cattle market is right in the heart there, labelled. Property market issues were also very important and informed the study. There is a strong independent sector there. It's sort of weathered the storm relatively well. There is considered to be an opportunity for yet more food retail. It's hard to believe the town benefits from an awful lot of food retail, but studies suggest that there may be some scope for some more, and I think then it becomes very, very important about being proactive and demonstrating the suitability of town centre sites against the potential availability of edge or out of centre sites. And I think that's one thing that we've emphasised that they should take forward is using the study to help protect less sequentially preferable sites, to protect the economy of the town centre. Office market, it's a local office market, although it is the county town and the county hall is within the town. So given that the county hall buildings are kind of past their sell-by dates, the council are minded to dispose of those sites, it presents a potentially fantastic opportunity to relocate all those workers in the heart of the town centre, which would be a really amazing thing for the market and the economy of the town. Leisure offer is quite important. It does attract quite a lot of visitors, Mould, even though it's relatively small. We looked at the hotel market and the issue of the opportunity to bring forward and in the future allocate housing sites on the edge of the town. Cattle market site is a real issue which will be looked at and talked about for some time, I suspect. But it does present opportunities. It's really important in bringing people to the town. I mean, it brings cattle as well to the town, and that's got its own sort of drama and interest. I think there is anecdotal evidence that there is sort of certainly some conversations in townspeople that some people are very much that it brings a lot of trade to the town. Others are very sceptical about actually how much trade it brings on market days. So a better understanding of its function and role that it plays in the town would be helpful. But it is slap bang in the middle of the town, and if you're trying to protect your town centre and attract new investment, then it does present the opportunity for new retail development there, and that is something that we looked at the opportunity for, and we soft market tested, and there would be some potential interest. And I think that is so relevant when the town is under siege from big food retailers on the edge of town. I think the council, or not just this council, all councils, need to be far more proactive in seeking out town centre opportunities and working hard to try and make them work for modern day retailer requirements. And I think it's such an important issue. And we work all over the country, and I don't think there is a town that we're working in where food retail isn't at the heart of the conundrum that the town faces. So there's the cattle market site, but also I think in tandem there's the opportunity for County Hall to drop into the town centre, which would have a massive benefit to the economy of the town, the economy of the street market. So that is an opportunity that it presents itself. So we've done further work on the County Hall site, feasibility of that, but there are other alternatives where the council offices may go. So decisions are being made about that as we speak. But just back to the kind of technical stuff. So we basically did this study, 36 sites, and it was a sitting exercise. So they went through the suitability test, then the availability test, and then the viability test, and it was like, the sites, some of them just weren't suitable. They stayed up in the top sieve, and it just went through that stage. And this was a sort of stuff that we ended up with. The green ones are the ones that found their way through all the levels. So those sites, those green sites, we then went away and did design-led studies on their capacities. And we did loads of them, but I've just focused on the town centre ones, given that the issue is about market towns. This is the cattle market site. Site 26 is the cattle market site. Site 27 is the police station site. Site 21 is Terrick House, which is that grey stone building, which is a council-owned former county hall building. And there's a BT exchange there at Site 32. But these sites come together. In between is a relatively recent bus interchange. Buses are really quite important in the town. There's no train station. Nearest station is Buckley, which is some way away, and then that's the high street. That junction there is the core, the historic core of the town. So we've just done a kind of high-level exercise of looking at what opportunities these sites would present. The cattle market, if it was appropriately relocated, and there are sites on the edge of town which would be potentially suitable should they become available. That could be the cattle market site could be released for retail-led, for food, for a smaller town centre format food retail-led redevelopment. It links in so well with the high streets in that it's already got these little lanes that link to it, as well as some street frontage, and then the police station site being one of the public sector partners of the county would lend. They don't need all the land that they've got or the building they've got, so that would lend itself to in being adjacent to the existing old county hall building as the location for replacement county hall accommodation. We feel it actually all hangs together rather well and presents quite a strong potential strategy, but that has to be put out there and debated. So we did a range of different scenarios, different options, testing different capacities. Parking obviously is always very important. The railway cut just goes alongside the fat blue building, and that does present the opportunity to load the site with parking, because there would be a loss of parking if the site came forward in this form. So you can exploit those levels that are already existing across the site. There are a range of other sites. These were the principal town centre sites. There were a couple of other, 24 and 25 were two town centre car park sites. That's the post office site, 24. 23 is a major car park with Travis Perkins site attached to it. All present opportunities, although the car parking is a critical issue as was talked about earlier, and so we do need to protect the town and keep people on board with the idea of change and growth. So parking is going to be important. So that's the town today. That is just a graphic which shows a kind of phase one opportunity with these big large housing sites on the edge of town, the largest being in that northwest quarter. That was seen as the most appropriate location. Very concerned about coalescence of this town with other towns, and then a further phase beyond. So it works out at about 3,000 new dwellings potentially. And I mean, that's a very cold exercise, and we were very cautious about this sort of information getting out, because it's got to be tested. It's not been through the planning process. It's got to go through the statutory plan making process. But it does generate debate and stimulate reaction, which is actually, I think, what the next stage is going to be all about. So in terms of the strategy at the end, having done the three stages, we suggested that the town should try and consolidate, should be as tightly drawn as it possibly can be, There was a question about whether or not the edge of centre, or that edge of centre retail centred on that roundabout, is part of the town centre, but I think it's gone now, and I think it has to be seen to be as much part of the town centre as possible in order to get whatever benefit it might bring in terms of link trips. But there are a number of other locations where it basically felt it just got a little bit flabby around the edges, and so we've recommended it being tightened up. And then there's sort of 3 or 4 key moves which would form the bones of the strategy for Mould as a market town. The review of the town centre boundary, the opportunity presented by County Hall for the town centre, the conundrum of cattle market site, whether or not it's relocated, which should be a debate, and the opportunity that's presented by strategic housing growth, which I think, given that the members are quite keen on the opportunities, I think that political support should be welcome, because typically these are very, very difficult issues to get through politically. So that potentially is quite positive. And so just some lessons learned for this sort of debate about market towns and about planning positively for market towns. I think the most important thing about this, I think, is about councils being proactive and being in control, not reactive, not on the back foot. And I think Flintshire are. I think they're very engaged with their town council, their network of town councils. So there is a good relationship across there's 7 or 8 towns, all with town councils that are active. So local engagement, I think, is positive and strong across the county. And that instills local ownership for these sorts of strategies, which I think is critical for their successful delivery over the period of 5 to 10 to 15 years or so. Town council lead is generally how they're being set up. They're being set up not as county council lead, but as town council lead, and I think that will help ownership and buy-in. The study will inform the statutory plan. I mean, it has to be a plan-led thing. So we are uninhibited by that at the moment in undertaking this sort of work, but it has to then inform and go through the statutory plan-led process, and that is exactly what they intend to do. And I mentioned before, I think the really important thing is using these sorts of studies to protect and look after the town centre, being proactive about identifying town centre opportunities. And whilst these things take ages to adopt, this sort of work has an instant value in you can catch and steer live development proposals that are coming forward, that the planning officers are dealing with on a daily basis. You can use this process to just be more on the front foot, be more proactive as applications come forward. And I think that is a kind of value-added thing that this process has delivered for them. But that's my presentation. Thank you.